Hi everyone and welcome back to my kitchen. Today I am making a buckwheat sourdough bread that's soft, aromatic and full of gentle earthy flavor. This bread has a lightly nutty taste from the buckwheat, but it's not heavy or bitter. The crumb stays soft and tender, while the crust bakes up thin and crisp. I'm using mostly bread flour here, so the buckwheat adds flavor rather than overpowering the loaf. The result is a balanced sourdough that's comforting, slightly rustic, and very easy to enjoy. So let's get started. Before we mix the dough, let's feed our starter. The night before baking, I start with 20 grams of sourdough starter. To that, I add 50 grams of water. For the flour, I use a small blend. 3 grams of whole wheat flour and 47 grams of all-purpose flour with 11% protein. I mix everything well until there are no dry spots. Then cover it loosely and let it ferment overnight in a warm place, around 78 degrees Fahrenheit. Depending on the temperature, the starter is usually ready in 6 to 8 hours. Once the starter is active and bubbly, we can move on to mixing the dough. In a large bowl, I add 350 grams of water and 100 grams of active bubbly sourdough starter. You will know your starter is ready when it has doubled in size, looks savory, has a lot of bubbles on the surface, and smells fresh with a light tang. I mix everything well until the starter is fully dissolved in the water. Next, I add 50 grams of buckwheat flour and 450 grams of bread flour. I mix everything together just until there are no dry flour left. I usually start with the Danish whisk and then switch to mixing by hand. At this stage, the dough will look rough and you might think it's too dry. That's completely normal. Keep mixing until everything is combined and the dough starts to feel sticky. Right now, we are just bringing the ingredients together, so a shaggy dough is exactly what we want. I cover the bowl and let the dough rest for about 40 minutes to 1 hour. This rest allows the flour to fully hydrate and begin developing structure on its own. After the rest, you will notice the dough already feels softer and more elastic. Now it's time to add the salt. I add 10 grams of salt, then pour the remaining 20 grams of water over the dough to help the salt dissolve more easily. I start by pinching the dough with my fingers, then squeezing it. Once all the water is absorbed, I switch to a slap and fold method until the salt is fully incorporated and the dough becomes smoother. When everything is well combined, I cover the bowl and let the dough rest at room temperature for about 30 minutes before moving to a stretch and folds. After the rest, we need to strengthen the dough with stretch and folds. I do 3 to 4 sets of stretch and folds, spacing them about 30 to 45 minutes apart. Let's start with the first set. I wet my hands and gently lift one side of the dough, stretch it upward, and fold it over itself. I rotate the bowl and repeat until all sides are folded. Once the folds are done, I cover the bowl and place the dough in a warm spot, around 80 degrees Fahrenheit, to rest for 30 to 45 minutes. I usually rest it for 30 minutes. After the first rest, the dough already feels stronger and more relaxed. Now I'm doing the second set of stretch and folds. Just like before, I wet my hands, gently lift one side of the dough, stretch it upward, and fold it over itself. You will notice the dough holds its shape better and feels smoother than it did during the first set. That's a good sign. Once the folds are done, I cover the bowl and place dough back in a warm spot to rest for another 30 minutes. Now I'm doing the third set of stretch and folds. At this point, the dough holds its shape well and no longer spreads out as much, which is exactly what we want to see. If you're not happy with the structure, you can go ahead and do a fourth set of stretch and folds. I'm stopping at 3 because the dough already feels strong and ready. Once the folds are done, I cover the bowl and let it to rest and continue fermenting for about 2 to 3 hours, until it has doubled in size and you can see bubbles forming on the surface. Once the dough has finished bulk fermentation, it should feel airy and light. I generously sprinkle the top of the dough with whole wheat flour, then gently turn it out onto the work surface, helping myself with a silicone scraper. At this stage, I do a light pre-shape. I bring all sides of the dough into the center to form a loose round, then flip it over and gently tighten it by rotating the dough in my hands, tugging the edges underneath. This step helps organize the structure of the dough and makes the final shaping much easier. Once that's done, I cover the dough and let it rest for about 30 minutes. After the rest, I prepare my banneton by generously dusting it with whole wheat flour. Then I return to the dough, lightly sprinkle it with flour, and gently flip it over so smooth side is facing down. Now I move on to the final shaping. I stretch the dough slightly, fold the bottom toward the center, then fold in the left and right sides, followed by the top. Next, I bring all the edges toward the center and gently roll the dough, creating tension on the surface as I go. I finish by pinching the seam to seal it. Once shaped, I place the dough seam side up into the banneton. To beat a little more tension, I gently bring the sides toward the center again. Press firmly with my hand and dust the top with more flour. Finally, the dough is ready for cold fermentation, so I leave it uncovered and place it in the refrigerator overnight or at least 8 hours. The next day when I'm ready to bake, I start by preheating the oven to 500 degrees Fahrenheit with a Dutch oven inside. Once the oven is ready, I prepare a small piece of parchment paper, take the dough out of the refrigerator and gently turn it out onto the parchment. I lightly sprinkle the surface with flour and use my hand to make sure the dough is evenly coated. Now it's time to score. I take a sharp blade and make one confident slash on the right side of the dough. Then I add a very light second score, followed by a third shallow cut just under the surface of the dough. This scoring pattern helps the bread rise beautifully in the oven and create a nice defined ear. Once the dough is scored, I carefully lower it into the hot Dutch oven, cover it with the lid, and place it in the oven. I bake the bread covered for 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, I remove the lid, reduce the oven temperature to 450 degrees Fahrenheit, and continue baking for another 20 to 25 minutes until the crust is deeply golden and crisp. Once baked, I carefully remove the bread from the Dutch oven and gently knock the bottom to make sure it's fully baked. It should sound hollow. Then place it on a cooling rack. It's important to let the bread cool completely before slicing. As tempting as it is, cutting too early can affect the texture of the crumb, so let it rest for at least 30 minutes. After cooling, you will see a thin, cracky crust and a soft interior with a gentle nutty aroma from the buckwheat. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the recipe, don't forget to like the video, leave a comment and subscribe to the channel. I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.